The unforeseen encounter. Judge Marcus Thompson had always prided himself on his composure. For over 2 decades, he had worn the robe with dignity, earning a reputation for fairness and impartiality in a courtroom where he was one of the few black judges in the district. With each case he presided over, he fought against the odds, not just for justice, but as a beacon of hope for his community. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood of Atlanta, he knew the struggles and dreams of those who walked through his courtroom doors. His parents, both dedicated educators, instilled in him the importance of education and perseverance, values that guided him throughout his life. As he left the courthouse one warm Friday evening, briefcase in hand, Marcus felt a sense of anticipation for the weekend ahead. His daughter, Asha, was home from college, and he had promised to help her practice for her upcoming mock court competition. The thought of spending quality time with her filled him with warmth, a contrast to the weight of his responsibilities as a judge. On the other side of town, Officer Michael Brennan was wrapping up his shift. A 10-year veteran of the Atlanta Police Department, he had joined the force straight out of the military, feeling a deep calling to serve and protect his community. Raised in a predominantly white suburb, Michael's understanding of Atlanta's complex racial dynamics was shaped more by family lore than by personal experience. His father, grandfather, and 2 uncles had all worn the badge, and he carried on the legacy with pride, believing wholeheartedly in the mission of the police force. As Michael navigated through the bustling streets of Atlanta, his radio crackled with a call about a suspected car break just a few blocks away. The description was vague. A black male in a suit seen tampering with a car outside the courthouse. Michael acknowledged the dispatch, his heart racing with the adrenaline that came from the unpredictability of police work. He turned onto Peachtree Street, ready to assess the situation and uphold the law. Little did either man know that their lives were about to intersect in a way that would forever change their perspectives. Arriving at the courthouse, Michael spotted a figure near a sleek black sedan, his back turned. The man wore a tailored suit, and for a brief moment, Michael felt a sense of unease as he approached. He couldn't shake the nagging doubt that this was the man he was supposed to confront. Drawing in a breath to steady his nerves, he called out, "Hey, you there? What are you doing by that car?" Startled, Marcus turned around. Confusion etched on his face. "Excuse me?" "I'm leaving from work, officer." Michael's jaw tightened as he took in the sight of the judge, an imposing figure with an air of authority and confidence. "I received a report of someone tampering with a vehicle. Can I see your ID?" A mix of disbelief and irritation washed over Marcus. "I'm Judge Marcus Thompson. I was just at the courthouse. I think there's been a misunderstanding." Michael, caught off guard by the sudden realization of who he was addressing, didn't back down. His training kicked in, reminding him to assert his authority. But this wasn't just any citizen. This was a man who held significant power in the community. "I still need to see your ID, sir," he insisted, his voice firm but hesitant. The tension in the air grew thick. Marcus felt a wave of humiliation wash over him. He had spent years fighting for respect in a system that often marginalized people like him. And now, here he was, being questioned like a criminal in a public parking lot. "I have every right to be here," he replied, struggling to maintain his composure. "I'm a judge, and I don't appreciate being treated like this." Michael's cheeks flushed with a mix of embarrassment and frustration. He had always prided himself on being fair, yet here he was, seemingly upholding the very prejudices he had vowed to fight against. "I'm just doing my job, sir," he said, trying to sound authoritative, but feeling increasingly small. For a moment, the 2 men locked eyes. One a judge who had dedicated his life to justice, the other a police officer trying to prove himself in a system he had grown up in. The encounter was fraught with unspoken tension, each man grappling with the weight of their identities and the expectations that came with them. Finally, Marcus reached into his pocket and retrieved his ID, holding it out for Michael to take. "Here," he said, the hurt in his voice barely concealed. "You can verify who I am." Michael took the ID, but instead of merely checking it, he found himself reflecting on the implications of this moment. As he glanced at the name on the ID, Judge Marcus Thompson, he felt the weight of their interaction settling heavily on his shoulders. He was aware of the systemic issues that plagued law enforcement, the deep-rooted biases that often clouded judgment. After a brief moment, he returned the ID, his voice softer now. "I'm sorry, Judge. I didn't realize it was you. I was just following up on a report." Marcus nodded, but the sting of humiliation lingered. "Just remember, officer, appearances can be deceiving. Not every black man in a suit is a criminal." With that, the two men parted ways, each carrying the weight of their encounter. Marcus climbed into his car, the engine humming to life beneath him, but his heart felt heavy. The incident replayed in his mind, a reminder of the prejudices that still existed even within the law. Meanwhile, Michael returned to his patrol car, grappling with the unease of what had just transpired. He had always prided himself on being fair, yet the incident had exposed a flaw in his understanding, his ability to see beyond the badge and the robe, beyond the stereotypes that clouded judgment. As he drove away, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter had changed him in some fundamental way. The weekend passed uneventfully for Marcus, but the memory of the confrontation lingered. He spoke with Asha about the importance of resilience and integrity in the face of adversity, though he felt the weight of his own experience pressing down on him. As he shared his thoughts, he wondered if he could use this experience to foster dialogue about race and respect in his community. On Monday morning, as Marcus arrived at the courthouse, he couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. He needed to confront the feelings stirred up by the incident, to turn the experience into a teaching moment, not just for himself, but for those who looked up to him. It was time to take a stand, not just for himself, but for the principles he held dear. Little did he know that Michael would be back in the same parking lot, a chance encounter lingering in the air like an unfinished conversation. The paths of the judge and the officer would intersect again, but this time, it would be under different circumstances, forcing both men to confront their biases and assumptions. The second encounter. The morning sun spilled over the Atlanta skyline, casting a golden hue across the city. Judge Marcus Thompson awoke with a mix of determination and unease. The encounter with Officer Michael Brennan lingered in his mind, a stark reminder of the complexities of his position as a black judge in a predominantly white justice system. As he prepared for his day, he couldn't shake the feeling that the universe had orchestrated their meeting for a reason. Perhaps it was time for a change, not just for himself, but for the community he served. At the courthouse, Marcus found himself reflecting on the profound responsibility he carried. He had always aimed to be a role model, someone who could inspire others to rise above the challenges they faced. Today, he would not only preside over court cases, but also take a stand for something greater. He could use his platform to foster conversations that mattered, to bridge the divide that often seemed insurmountable. Meanwhile, Officer Michael Brennan was grappling with his own thoughts. The incident with Judge Thompson had unsettled him more than he cared to admit. It was a reflection of the biases he had unknowingly absorbed throughout his life. As he drove to work, the memory of the judge's disappointed expression haunted him. Michael had grown up in a world where assumptions about race were often unspoken, yet now he understood that these biases could have dire consequences. After spending the weekend attending a workshop on implicit bias and community relations, Michael felt a sense of urgency to change, not just for himself, but for the department he represented. He realized that being a police officer came with an immense responsibility to serve all citizens fairly, and he could no longer ignore the discomfort that came with confronting his own biases. Arriving at the precinct, Michael was determined to share what he had learned with his colleagues. He gathered a few fellow officers in the break room, eager to spark a conversation. "Hey guys, I just came from a really enlightening workshop about racial bias in policing," he began, trying to sound enthusiastic despite the heavy atmosphere. "I think we should consider discussing this as a team. It's important for us to understand how our actions impact the community. A few officers exchanged skeptical glances. What's there to discuss? One grumbled. We're just doing our jobs. Michael pressed on, undeterred. But that's exactly the point. If we don't acknowledge our biases, how can we ensure we're serving everyone fairly? We have to do better. Why don't we just stick to the job and leave the politics out of it? Another officer chimed in, arms crossed defensively. The conversation spiraled into heated debates, with some officers arguing that acknowledging bias was unnecessary, while others agreed with Michael, recognizing the need for change. Despite the pushback, Michael felt empowered to keep pushing for dialogue. That afternoon, he decided to take a step further. He reached out to community leaders and activists, inviting them to meet for coffee and discuss ways to improve relations between the police and the community. He knew he needed allies who understood the struggles of marginalized voices and could guide him in fostering meaningful conversations. As the days passed, the tension between Michael and his colleagues grew palpable. The more he sought to engage in discussions about bias and community relations, the more resistance he faced from those unwilling to confront their own shortcomings. But he was determined to persevere. He had seen the damage that systemic racism inflicted on people like Judge Thompson, and he knew he couldn't turn a blind eye. Back at the courthouse, Judge Marcus Thompson was busy preparing for his cases, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something had to be done. As he glanced through his calendar, a thought struck him. Why not use his position to foster dialogue? He envisioned a community forum, an event where residents could voice their experiences and concerns while law enforcement listened openly. He began drafting a proposal for the forum, outlining his vision of creating a safe space for dialogue. He wanted to invite not only police officers, but also community leaders, educators, and residents from various backgrounds to share their stories and discuss solutions. His heart raced at the thought of what this could mean for Atlanta. An opportunity to create bridges, to foster understanding where there had been division. That evening, as Marcus sat at his kitchen table, he shared his idea with his daughter, Asha. "I want to organize a community forum," he said, excitement bubbling in his voice. "It'll be a space for people to come together, share their experiences, and talk about ways to improve relations with the police." Asha's eyes lit up. "That's amazing, Dad. It's so important for people to have a voice. How can I help?" Marcus smiled at her enthusiasm. "I want to ensure we have diverse representation. Can you help me reach out to local organizations and community leaders? We need to make this as inclusive as possible." "Absolutely. I'll start making calls tomorrow," Asha replied, already pulling out her phone to make a list. As the night wore on, Marcus felt a sense of hope. He had always believed in the power of dialogue, and now he was taking action. But he knew that to make this forum successful, he needed the participation of law enforcement, especially Officer Brennan. It was time for them to meet again and turn their initial confrontation into something meaningful. The next day, Marcus made his way to the precinct to meet with Officer Brennan. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow that seemed to promise new beginnings. As he approached the precinct, he felt a mix of apprehension and excitement. This could be a pivotal moment for both men, an opportunity to connect and create change. Inside the precinct, Michael was deep in conversation with a few colleagues, still trying to convey the importance of understanding implicit bias. When he saw Marcus enter, his heart raced. He had hoped that this meeting would serve as a fresh start, an opportunity to make amends and collaborate. "Judge Thompson," Michael called out, walking toward him with an extended hand. "Thank you for coming." Marcus shook his hand firmly, sensing a shift in Michael's demeanor. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. I wanted to discuss an idea I have, creating a community forum where we can all come together to talk about race and policing." Michael's eyes widened in surprise. "That's a fantastic idea. I'd love to help with that. It's exactly what our community needs right now." As they sat down together, the tension from their previous encounter began to dissipate. They exchanged thoughts on the importance of fostering understanding and respect between law enforcement and the community. Michael shared his experiences and challenges within the police force, while Marcus spoke candidly about the impact of systemic bias and the responsibility of those in power to listen. Their conversation flowed easily, both men realizing that they were on the same journey, albeit from different starting points. They discussed potential speakers for the forum, the need for inclusive representation, and how to ensure the space felt safe for everyone involved. "I want to make sure that voices from the community are prioritized," Marcus emphasized. "This isn't just about us. This is about creating an open dialogue where people can express their fears and hopes." Michael nodded, inspired by Marcus's passion. "I agree completely. It's time we break down the walls and start listening." As they finalized their plans, Marcus felt a sense of unity with Michael, a connection that had emerged from an unexpected encounter. They had both grown from their experiences and were now ready to lead their community toward healing and understanding. "Let's get to work," Marcus said, a newfound determination lighting up his expression. Together, they began outlining the logistics for the forum, deciding on a date and location. The excitement in the air was palpable as they recognized that they were not just preparing for an event. They were embarking on a journey of transformation that would impact countless lives in Atlanta. As they worked late into the afternoon, both men felt the weight of their respective roles. Marcus as a judge, a voice of authority and fairness, and Michael as a police officer, a protector of the community. Together, they were ready to change the narrative, to shift perceptions, and to pave the way for a more equitable future. The forum would not just be a one-time event. It would serve as the beginning of an ongoing dialogue, a commitment to work collaboratively toward dismantling the barriers that had long divided their community. And as they prepared to bring their vision to life, both men knew that they were stepping into a new era, one defined by understanding, respect, and a shared commitment to justice. Part 3. Building Bridges. The day of the community forum arrived, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. The auditorium was filled with chairs set in a semicircle, facing a stage adorned with a banner that read "Bridging the Gap," a community forum on race. Building bridges. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm glow through the windows of the community center where the forum was taking place. Judge Marcus Thompson stood at the podium, a sense of urgency mixed with hope thrumming in his chest. He had seen firsthand the fractures that existed between the police and the community, and today marked a pivotal moment for both. "Welcome, everyone," Marcus began, his voice resonating through the packed auditorium. The chatter subsided as attendees settled into their seats. "Thank you for being here, for taking the time to engage in this vital conversation. Today we gather not just to listen but to understand, to challenge our preconceptions, and to pave the way for a brighter future." As he scanned the room, he saw a diverse audience, young students sitting alongside seasoned activists, police officers in uniform mingling with community leaders. The mix of people represented the very tapestry of Atlanta, a city rich in culture but marred by the complexities of race and policing. "This forum is a safe space for all voices," Marcus continued, leaning into the microphone. "We're here to share our experiences and listen to one another. It's through understanding that we can foster real change." With that, he gestured toward Officer Michael Brennan, who stood beside him, a mixture of excitement and apprehension evident on his face. "I'd like to introduce Officer Brennan, who has graciously agreed to join us in this conversation," Marcus said. "Michael has taken the brave step of acknowledging the biases within policing, and we're eager to hear his perspective." Michael stepped up to the microphone, feeling the weight of expectation resting on his shoulders. "Thank you, Judge Thompson," he said, glancing around the room. "I want to start by acknowledging that I understand I'm speaking to a group of individuals who may have had negative experiences with law enforcement. I recognize that for many, trust has been broken." He took a deep breath, his voice steadying as he continued. I joined the police force to serve and protect, but I've come to realize that my understanding of the community I serve was limited. We must recognize our own biases, and I am committed to fostering a relationship built on respect and accountability." As he spoke, murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. Michael's willingness to confront uncomfortable truths sparked a sense of hope, and he could see that some community members were beginning to warm to the idea of collaboration. To facilitate discussion, Marcus had prepared a series of questions that encouraged attendees to share their experiences and concerns. He invited community members to raise their hands if they wanted to contribute. The first speaker was a young black man named Jamal, whose voice trembled slightly as he addressed the room. "Thank you for organizing this," Jamal began, glancing nervously at the panel. "I grew up in a neighborhood where interactions with police were often negative. My friends and I would be stopped simply for walking down the street. We felt like criminals just for existing. It's hard to trust when your experiences tell you otherwise." Michael nodded, his heart heavy with empathy. "I understand, Jamal. I can't change what has happened, but I want to learn how we can prevent those experiences in the future. What can we do to make you feel safer?" Another attendee, an older woman named Ms. Jenkins, raised her hand. "I've seen my children scared to walk home after dark, afraid they might be stopped or treated unfairly. We need police officers to understand that our fears are rooted in reality, and we need them to protect us, not to intimidate us." The room fell silent, and Michael responded, "Thank you for sharing that. It's crucial for us as officers to hear these stories. We need to acknowledge that the fear is real, and that it stems from past experiences that we must address." As the discussion continued, voices rose and fell in a rhythm of shared vulnerability. One by one, community members shared their stories, some filled with pain, others infused with hope. They spoke of generational trauma, of feeling unheard and marginalized, and of their desire for collaboration. Throughout the forum, Marcus observed the growing connection between the community and the police. It was evident that many attendees were experiencing a shift in perspective, and he could see the walls beginning to crumble. The panel became a space of honest conversation, where people spoke their truths without fear of judgment. After a heartfelt exchange, Marcus felt compelled to steer the conversation toward actionable steps. While it's important to share our experiences, we must also focus on how we can work together moving forward. How can we create initiatives that foster trust and transparency? At that moment, a local educator named Mr. Ortiz stood up. "We need more community programs that involve police officers. I suggest creating mentorship programs where officers can engage with youth in schools. Building relationships early on can change perceptions and foster mutual respect." Michael's eyes lit up at the idea. "That's a brilliant suggestion. If officers participate in local events, sports, tutoring, community service, we can humanize the badge and build relationships." The audience erupted in applause, and Marcus felt a surge of pride. This was what he had hoped for, a community coming together, brainstorming solutions, and finding common ground. He encouraged further dialogue and collaboration among attendees, knowing that the forum was just the beginning of a larger movement. As the afternoon progressed, Marcus and Michael led a series of breakout sessions. Each group was tasked with discussing specific challenges and brainstorming actionable solutions. Facilitators guided discussions, ensuring that everyone had a chance to contribute. In one room, a group of young adults discussed how to address the stigma surrounding mental health in the community, while another group focused on advocating for more resources in schools. Marcus moved from room to room, listening intently and taking notes. The enthusiasm in the air was contagious. As the forum drew to a close, Marcus and Michael returned to the main stage. "Thank you all for your honesty, your passion, and your commitment to change," Marcus said, a smile spreading across his face. "This is just the beginning of our journey together. Let's commit to keeping the dialogue open." Michael added, "We're in this together. I encourage each of you to continue these conversations in your neighborhoods, with your friends, and within your families. The change we seek starts with us." As the audience stood, applauding the two men, Marcus felt a swell of hope and gratitude. This forum had not only brought people together, but had also laid the groundwork for a new chapter in the relationship between the police and the community. Later, as the attendees filtered out of the auditorium, Michael and Marcus stood at the entrance, exchanging excited glances. "I can't believe how powerful that was," Michael said, his enthusiasm palpable. "I truly feel like we're on the verge of something significant." Marcus nodded. "We've begun to break down barriers, but there's still much work to do." This forum was just the first step. We need to keep the momentum going. "I'll reach out to our local leaders to schedule follow-up meetings, and I hope you'll join me." "Absolutely," Michael replied, a renewed sense of purpose igniting within him. "I'm committed to this cause, and I'll rally my colleagues to participate in future events." As they shook hands, both men felt the weight of their roles, Marcus as a judge and Michael as a police officer, transforming into something more profound. They were no longer just representatives of their institutions. They were advocates for change, working hand in hand to build bridges where once there had been walls. As they left the community center, the sun set behind them, casting a brilliant orange glow over the horizon. The journey ahead would be filled with challenges and setbacks, but for the first time in a long time, Marcus and Michael felt optimistic about the path they were forging together. Part 4. Challenges ahead. In the weeks following the forum, the excitement of the event lingered in the air like a sweet aftertaste. Both Marcus and Michael received messages from attendees expressing their gratitude and eagerness to continue the dialogue. However, amidst this optimism, they both understood that change would not come easily. At the courthouse, Marcus faced an overwhelming caseload, and his role as a judge required him to navigate a complex system often resistant to change. He attended meetings with fellow judges and legal professionals, advocating for policies that promoted equity and understanding. But he often encountered skepticism from those who believed that the status quo was sufficient. "Judge Thompson, I understand your passion, but our system works as it is," one of his colleagues said during a particularly contentious meeting. "Why fix what isn't broken?" Marcus clenched his jaw, fighting the urge to respond defensively. "With all due respect, your definition of working may differ from those who feel marginalized by our system. We must recognize that fairness isn't just about adhering to the letter of the law. It's about ensuring that every individual feels heard and valued." Challenges ahead. In the weeks that followed the community forum, a palpable buzz of anticipation filled the air in Atlanta. Marcus Thompson's reputation as a fair and thoughtful judge was bolstered by his active engagement in discussions about racial equity and police reform. Yet, the reality of systemic change soon revealed itself to be a complex and arduous journey. As Marcus walked into the courthouse on a rainy Monday morning, the familiar sounds of ringing phones and rustling papers greeted him. The air was thick with tension. He could feel the undercurrents of dissent among his colleagues. That day, a meeting had been scheduled among the judges to discuss recent community feedback on policing and the judiciary's role in fostering better relationships. Marcus took his seat at the long, polished table, glancing around at his fellow judges. Most were seasoned veterans of the bench, accustomed to the traditional ways of doing things. They wore expressions that ranged from apathetic to openly skeptical, and he felt a knot of apprehension form in his stomach. "Thank you all for gathering," Chief Judge Anderson began, her voice steady but authoritative. "We have received several letters from community members regarding their experiences with the police and the court system. Some of these experiences highlight systemic issues that we must address." Marcus leaned forward, sensing an opportunity to speak. "I believe it's crucial we take these concerns seriously. Our role extends beyond the courtroom. We are community leaders, and we must reflect the values of the people we serve." A senior judge named Peter Harris, known for his traditionalist views, interrupted. "With all due respect, Judge Thompson, we are here to uphold the law, not to engage in social engineering. The law is blind, and we must maintain that objectivity." Marcus's heart raced, but he held his ground. The law may be blind, but we cannot afford to be. Justice is not merely about punishment. It's about understanding the context and the lives behind the cases we handle. If we ignore the societal issues at play, we perpetuate a cycle of injustice. The room fell silent for a moment, and Marcus could see that some judges were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Chief Judge Anderson glanced at Marcus, her expression thoughtful. "What do you propose we do, Judge Thompson?" "Perhaps we could establish a committee focused on community engagement," Marcus suggested, "to bridge the gap between the courts and the community. We could host regular forums, similar to the one I held with Officer Brennan, to hear directly from the people. Their input could guide our decisions." Judge Harris scoffed. "And what if that input contradicts the law? Are we to change our rulings based on popular opinion?" "Not at all," Marcus replied, maintaining his composure. "But understanding community perspectives can help us interpret the law more effectively. It can illuminate the human impact of our rulings." The tension in the room was palpable, but Marcus could see some judges beginning to nod in agreement. He continued, "Furthermore, we could initiate training programs for all judges and court personnel to raise awareness about implicit biases and the challenges faced by marginalized communities. Education is a key component in dismantling these barriers." The debate continued, with some judges voicing their concerns while others supported Marcus's vision. Chief Judge Anderson ultimately proposed a compromise. "Let's form a small working group to explore these ideas further. We will reconvene in a month to discuss our findings." Although it wasn't a total victory, Marcus felt a sense of accomplishment. Change was slow, but it was happening. As he left the courthouse, he couldn't shake the feeling that every small step forward mattered. Later that week, Marcus met with Michael Brennan over coffee. They sat in a bustling cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the sound of chatter and clinking cups. Michael was animated, eager to share his thoughts on the forum and the next steps they could take. "I've been reflecting on our discussion," Michael said, stirring his coffee. "I think it's essential that we don't just wait for the next forum to engage with the community. We should be proactive, organize neighborhood events where officers can meet residents in a casual setting." "That's a great idea," Marcus replied. "But we also need to ensure that these events are focused on genuine dialogue. It's not enough for officers to just show up. They need to be open to hearing people's experiences and concerns." "Exactly," Michael said, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "We could partner with local organizations to set up listening sessions, maybe even create a community advisory board made up of residents who can give feedback on police practices." "Now you're talking," Marcus said, smiling. "I can reach out to some community leaders I know to help facilitate this. But we also have to prepare officers for these interactions. They need to understand the importance of listening without defensiveness." "Absolutely," Michael agreed. "I'll take the lead on organizing a training session for officers to help them understand community concerns and emphasize the importance of empathy." As they continued to brainstorm, Marcus felt a growing sense of camaraderie with Michael. Their shared commitment to bridging the divide was becoming a powerful force for change. They finished their coffees and set a plan to reconvene in a week to finalize the details. However, as they left the cafe, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of looming challenges. The road ahead was fraught with potential pushback. They were not just confronting a culture of skepticism within the judiciary, but also among the police force. The deeply entrenched biases and institutional norms wouldn't be easy to dismantle. Meanwhile, as Marcus immersed himself in community engagements, he began to notice the resistance growing louder. The local news featured stories of police misconduct, and tensions in the community rose. The atmosphere became charged with anger and frustration, overshadowing the positive momentum they had built. One evening after a long day at the courthouse, Marcus received a call from a local community leader, Angela, who was organizing a town hall meeting. "Judge Thompson, we need your support. There's been an incident involving the police that has escalated tensions in the community. People are angry, and we need to address it before it spirals out of control. Marcus felt a pit in his stomach. What happened? There was an arrest at a local high school. An officer reportedly used excessive force on a student during a routine check, Angela explained. The community is outraged, and we're organizing a meeting to discuss what happened and how we can move forward. I'll be there, Marcus said, determination surging within him. It's crucial that we respond to the community's concerns and show that we're listening. As the days passed, the town hall meeting loomed. Marcus prepared himself mentally for what he anticipated would be a heated discussion. He gathered his thoughts, recalling the principles of empathy and understanding he had been promoting. He was determined to stand as a bridge between the community and law enforcement, despite the rising tensions. On the night of the meeting, the community center buzzed with energy. People filled the room, their expressions a mix of anger and determination. Marcus arrived early to find a seat at the front, wanting to show his commitment to engaging with the community. When the meeting began, Angela opened the floor to community members, encouraging them to voice their frustrations. The stories poured out, tales of fear, injustice, and a feeling of being under siege. Marcus listened intently, taking notes and nodding in agreement as people recounted their experiences. When the moment came for him to speak, he felt the weight of the community's collective pain on his shoulders. I want to acknowledge the hurt and anger that many of you are feeling right now. It's valid and understandable. We must hold ourselves accountable to each other, and I'm here to listen and advocate for change. As he spoke, he saw the tension in the room shift. While some remained skeptical, others seemed to respond to his sincerity. We need to work together, Marcus continued. We can't change what has happened, but we can ensure it doesn't happen again. I'm committed to facilitating a dialogue between the police and the community to address these issues head-on. Angela joined him at the podium, urging attendees to share their thoughts on possible solutions. The room erupted with ideas, mentorship programs, community policing initiatives, and increased training for officers. As people spoke, a sense of solidarity began to emerge. The community was eager for change, and Marcus felt a renewed determination to help them achieve it. As the meeting came to a close, Marcus knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. But he also understood that this was a pivotal moment, one that could set the stage for meaningful change. With Michael by his side, and the community rallying behind them, they had the potential to rewrite the narrative, transforming pain into progress. The turning point. In the weeks following the tumultuous town hall meeting, Marcus and Michael immersed themselves in their collaborative efforts with renewed vigor. The community's energy and engagement had inspired them both, propelling them toward their goal of fostering understanding and respect between law enforcement and the community they served. Their first major initiative was a community picnic, planned for a sunny Saturday morning in Central Park. The idea was simple: create a relaxed environment where families could come together, enjoy good food, and engage in open conversations with local police officers. Marcus believed that this would be a powerful way to humanize the badge and show the community that officers were not just enforcers of the law, but also neighbors, friends, and allies. As they set up the event, Marcus felt a rush of excitement mingled with anxiety. He was in charge of coordinating logistics, ensuring enough food, chairs, and activities for families to enjoy. He'd enlisted local businesses to donate food, and volunteers had helped him put together games for the children. The buzz of anticipation was palpable as tents were erected, picnic tables were adorned with checkered cloths, and the smell of barbecue wafted through the air. Marcus, Michael called out, striding over with an armful of supplies. We're ready to go. The grill is heating up, and the music is set. In the weeks that followed, they worked tirelessly to implement their ideas. Community meetings became a regular occurrence, bringing together police officers, judges, and residents to share their experiences and foster understanding. They established mentorship programs between local officers and at-risk youth, allowing for meaningful connections to develop. However, as their initiatives gained momentum, Marcus began to notice the challenge of addressing the skepticism still present within the police department. Some officers resisted the changes, clinging to traditional methods and refusing to engage with the community openly. One evening, Marcus attended a meeting with the police department's leadership team. The atmosphere was tense, filled with apprehension and uncertainty. Officers exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the discussions surrounding community engagement. Chief Reynolds, a stern but respected figure in the department, opened the floor for discussion. We understand there's been a push for more community involvement, but some officers feel it's unnecessary. They believe our current methods are sufficient for maintaining order. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing this was an opportunity to confront the skepticism directly. I appreciate that perspective, Chief, but the reality is that community trust is essential for effective policing. We can't effectively serve our community if they don't trust us. A murmur of dissent rippled through the room, and Marcus pressed on. The events we've organized have shown us that there's a willingness to engage on both sides. However, that requires open-mindedness and a commitment to understanding one another. After a tense exchange, Chief Reynolds reluctantly acknowledged the importance of change. I hear you, Judge, but I need to know how we can balance these community initiatives with our officers' needs to ensure their safety and effectiveness on the job. By integrating community feedback into our training and policies, Marcus suggested, we can create a more comprehensive approach that addresses both community concerns and officers' needs. It's not about compromising safety, it's about enhancing it through collaboration. The meeting concluded with a tentative agreement to explore Marcus's suggestions further. Though the path remained rocky, he felt encouraged that their efforts were beginning to resonate within the police force. As days turned into weeks, the dialogue between officers and the community slowly began to shift. More officers started participating in community events, eager to connect with residents and share their experiences. Each interaction was a building block in the foundation of trust they were trying to establish. However, just as they began to see progress, an unforeseen incident rocked the community, a high-profile police shooting involving an unarmed black man. The news spread like wildfire, igniting outrage and protests throughout the city. The very fabric of the relationships they had worked so hard to build was suddenly put to the test. As Marcus watched the news coverage unfold, a sense of dread settled in. He knew the coming days would demand all the strength and resolve he had. This was a critical moment that could either reinforce the progress they had made or unravel it entirely. In the wake of the shooting, Marcus understood that they needed to respond swiftly and transparently. It was time to show the community that their voices mattered and that real accountability was on the table. The next day, he called for an emergency community meeting. He and Michael prepared to face the anger and frustration that had erupted in the aftermath of the incident, knowing that the stakes had never been higher. The battle for trust was far from over, but Marcus was determined to stand at the forefront of the movement for change. As they set up for the meeting, he felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The community was hurting, and he was ready to listen, ready to fight for justice and understanding, knowing that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but believing in the possibility of a brighter future. Fantastic, Marcus replied, relieved. I think this is going to be great for everyone. But I noticed a group of teens hanging back over there, he said, nodding toward a cluster of young people standing at the park's edge, their body language telling the story of hesitation and uncertainty. Let's make sure we invite them in. Good idea. I'll go talk to them, Michael said, his voice steady with confidence. As Michael approached the teens, Marcus watched from a distance, his heart pounding. This was a crucial moment. Engaging youth in these discussions could lead to significant change. He saw Michael crouch down to their level, his demeanor relaxed as he introduced himself. Hey there, I'm Officer Brennan. Are you guys going to join us for the picnic? We've got games, food, and a chance to hang out with your neighbors. Marcus felt a surge of pride as he observed Michael's approach. Rather than standing over them, he made an effort to connect as an equal, and gradually, the teens began to relax. One of the boys stepped forward, a skeptical expression lingering on his face. "What's the catch?" he asked, crossing his arms. "You guys just want to come here and play nice while we know the truth." Michael smiled gently. "No catch at all. We just want to get to know you better and have some fun together. We know there have been some tough interactions between the police and the community, but we're trying to change that. Come on, grab some food, and let's talk." After a few hesitant glances exchanged among the group, the teens finally relented. They made their way over to the picnic area, slowly warming up to the idea. The rest of the day unfolded beautifully, with laughter and chatter filling the park. Families mingled, children played games, and a local band set up, creating a vibrant atmosphere. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden hues across the park, Marcus took a moment to reflect on the event's success. He moved through the crowd, greeting people, sharing stories, and listening to their concerns. The picnic became a melting pot of conversations, blending perspectives from different backgrounds. Later, as the event began to wind down, Marcus noticed a group of people gathered around a table where local officers were engaging in a lively discussion about community policing strategies. Among them were some of the teenagers who had initially hesitated to join. They were animated, expressing their thoughts and ideas freely, feeling comfortable in the space they had created together. Marcus joined the conversation, impressed by the passion and ideas being shared. "This is amazing to see," he said, addressing the group. "You all have incredible insights. What do you think would help improve our relationship moving forward?" One girl, her hair tied back in a messy bun, spoke up. "We want to feel safe, but it would help if officers understood what we go through. It's not just about enforcing rules. It's about understanding our lives." Another boy added, "Yeah, maybe if there were more programs like this, it would help break down the walls. We want to see officers as real people, not just badges." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of their words. "That's exactly what we're aiming for. Building trust takes time, but conversations like this are a step in the right direction. Your voices are crucial in this process, and we need your input to shape our future initiatives." The energy shifted in the group as they began brainstorming ideas for future events and community projects. The discussion flowed seamlessly, with suggestions flying back and forth. As Marcus listened, he felt hope bloom in his chest. This was the change they had been striving for. After the picnic, as the sun set behind the Atlanta skyline, Marcus and Michael debriefed. They sat on a park bench, still buzzing from the day's success. "Today was something special," Marcus said, a grin spreading across his face. "I didn't expect such a strong turnout, let alone the engagement we saw from the youth." Michael nodded, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Absolutely. I think we're really starting to make an impact. Those kids, seeing them open up like that, it was incredible. We should keep this momentum going." "I agree. We need to plan more events like this," Marcus replied. "We can also start integrating community feedback into our training programs for officers. It's essential that they understand the context of their interactions with the community." As they strategized, Marcus felt a shift in his own perspective. He had started this journey as a judge focused on enforcing the law fairly, but now he was evolving into a leader dedicated to genuine community engagement. The role felt heavier, but it was also filled with purpose. A new dawn. The night of the emergency community meeting arrived, and the atmosphere was electric with tension. The auditorium at the community center was filled to capacity, with residents, activists, and police officers mingling together, united by a common purpose yet divided by fear and anger. As Marcus stepped onto the stage, he could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was not just another meeting. This was a pivotal moment in their journey toward healing and understanding. Microphones were set up, and the hum of conversation quieted as Marcus adjusted his glasses and scanned the room. He noticed a mix of familiar faces, those who had participated in the picnic, the teens who had engaged in their discussions, and community leaders who had been instrumental in fostering dialogue. But there were also many new faces, expressions etched with pain and frustration, ready to voice their concerns. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We are here to address the recent tragedy that has struck our community. I know many of you are hurting, and I want to acknowledge that pain. It is real, and it is justified. I am here to listen to you, to learn from you, and to work with you toward a solution." The crowd murmured, a mixture of skepticism and hope reverberating through the air. Marcus took a deep breath and continued, "This is a moment for us to come together, not just as members of different groups, but as human beings. We must confront the injustices that persist in our society, acknowledge our shared responsibility, and forge a path forward together." At the front of the room, a woman stood up, her voice rising above the crowd. "How can we trust you? How can we trust the police after what happened? You can talk all you want, but we need real action. We need accountability." Her word hung in the air like a challenge, and Marcus could feel the weight of her pain. "I hear you," he replied, his tone sincere. "Trust is built through accountability. We cannot erase the past, but we can commit to change. That begins tonight. We will establish a community task force to address police accountability and create a transparent system for reviewing incidents like the one that has shaken us. This task force will include community members, activists, police officers, and city officials." Another voice rose from the back of the room. "What does that even mean? We've heard promises before. Will you actually follow through this time? Tonight, I invite you to hold us accountable." Marcus responded, leaning into the skepticism. "If we do not follow through, I want you to call us out. We need your voices in this process. We cannot change what we don't recognize, and it starts with a commitment to dialogue." As the meeting progressed, people began to express their feelings, sharing stories of discrimination, fear, and a longing for respect. Some recounted their encounters with law enforcement, revealing the deep-seated wounds that had formed over generations. With each story, the collective pain in the room deepened, but so did the sense of camaraderie. They were all there to voice their truths and seek a better future. Michael stood at the edge of the stage, listening intently as one mother spoke of her son, a vibrant young man whose life had been taken too soon. The pain in her voice was palpable, and tears streamed down her cheeks. "My son was not a criminal. He was just a kid. Why did he have to die?" Her voice broke as she recounted the night her son was shot. And the crowd fell silent, a somber acknowledgement of the grief that had brought them all together. "We will honor your son's memory," Marcus declared, his voice resolute. "We will not let his death be in vain. His story will be part of the narrative we reshape together. We will work to ensure that every life matters and that every story is heard. This is our commitment to you." As the evening unfolded, the atmosphere began to shift. Although the pain was still present, there was a burgeoning sense of unity. People were not just expressing anger. They were discussing solutions, brainstorming ways to address the issues they faced together. A young activist named Lisa stood up, her voice trembling but passionate. "We need to bring back community policing. We need officers who live in our neighborhoods, who understand our struggles. This way, they won't see us as just criminals. They will see us as their neighbors." The crowd erupted in applause, and Marcus nodded, recognizing the validity of her proposal. Yes, community policing can foster understanding and help break down the barriers that exist between us. It's a model we can adopt, and I want to work with all of you to implement it. The conversation flowed like a river, with ideas and emotions intertwining. By the end of the night, a plan had begun to form, a way to hold the police accountable, while also allowing for community input in decision-making. They discussed workshops, education, and regular meetings between officers and residents. There was even talk of creating a mentorship program for youth, pairing them with officers who were committed to building trust. As the meeting concluded, Marcus felt a sense of hope. The crowd was energized, and for the first time in a long time, he believed they were on the right path. The anger that had permeated the room earlier had been transformed into a collective desire for change. As people began to file out, Michael joined Marcus on stage, his expression serious. "You handled that well, Marcus. I could feel the tension, but you turned it into something constructive." "Thank you, Michael, but we had a long way to go," Marcus replied, glancing at the now empty seats. "This is just the beginning. We need to keep this momentum going." In the days that followed, the community task force took shape. It included members from various backgrounds: activists, residents, police officers, and community leaders, all united by a shared goal of improving relationships and accountability within the police department. The task force met regularly, discussing policies, addressing concerns, and brainstorming ways to connect with the community. They organized town halls, workshops, and outreach programs, ensuring that the community felt included in the decision-making process. As the task force's work gained traction, a noticeable change began to ripple through the community. Residents felt more empowered to voice their concerns, and officers became more approachable and engaged. Children began to see police officers as friends rather than adversaries, and families participated in events that fostered understanding and collaboration. Yet, amid the progress, challenges remained. There were still incidents that sparked outrage and distrust. Marcus and Michael found themselves navigating a delicate balance, addressing the grievances while promoting the initiatives they had implemented. One particularly tense week saw the release of video footage showing an officer using excessive force during an arrest. The backlash was immediate and fierce, igniting protests across the city. Activists demanded accountability and called for the officer to be held responsible, putting the task force's work under scrutiny. Marcus knew they had to respond decisively. He called for an emergency meeting of the task force, knowing that transparency was paramount in maintaining the trust they had worked so hard to build. At the meeting, the atmosphere was charged. Members of the community were frustrated and anxious. They voiced their concerns, demanding justice for the victim and accountability for the officers involved. "Tonight, we stand at a crossroads," Marcus began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We have made strides toward building trust, but this incident has shaken that foundation. We must respond with integrity and accountability. It is our duty to address this situation head-on." He outlined a plan for the task force to advocate for a thorough investigation of the incident and to demand accountability from the police department. He emphasized the importance of being the voice of the community and ensuring that their concerns were heard. The crowd erupted in cheers, their energy palpable. As the speeches continued, Marcus felt the strength of their collective spirit. This was not just about one incident. It was about a movement for change, a demand for respect, and a fight for dignity. In the weeks that followed, the rally ignited a fire within the community, leading to calls for reform and accountability within the police department. The task force became a powerful advocate for change, working tirelessly to address the systemic issues that had long plagued their city. Through it all, Marcus and Michael continued to lead the charge, reminding the community that they were not alone in their fight. They facilitated dialogues between residents and officers, ensuring that each voice was heard and respected. Their efforts were met with challenges, but each obstacle only strengthened their resolve. One evening, as they sat in Marcus's office, reflecting on the progress they had made, Michael spoke up. "We've come a long way, Marcus. It's hard to believe how far we've come since that night in the parking lot. I never imagined we could make such an impact." Marcus smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. "It's not just us, Michael. It's the community. They've shown up, they've stood up, and they've demanded change. This is their victory." As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the city, Marcus looked out the window, filled with hope for the future. He knew that while there were still battles to fight, they had laid the groundwork for a new dawn, a dawn filled with promise, understanding, and a shared commitment to building a better world for everyone. And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was just the beginning, and together they would continue to rise, united in their quest for justice and equality.